Hi love bugs, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to do something a little bit different and talk to you guys about some online drama that has been unfolding over the course of the past couple of weeks, and that is the Allie Rose Co and Hot Girls Read trademark drama. Maybe you have been aware of it in the past couple weeks, basically like the course of this month. So I want to talk a little bit about the drama, but I really want to use it as kind of an entry point to talk more broadly also about what I think is really interesting about book spaces online and their relationship to the concept of community, and also their relationship to like their own role in capitalism. Because I think there is this really interesting dynamic where book spaces are so community oriented, but there is also a real strong capitalistic backing to a lot of the content that is created, especially when you are talking about merch items, as we are going to be talking about in this video. And then I guess before I say anything else, I don't want to encourage any kind of hate toward this creator. I really honestly think that she's gotten her due comeuppance. She made a mistake and is now facing her, karmic retribution for it. And from what I've seen, for the most part, a lot of the criticism that I've seen toward her has been in good faith and has been measured and, not ill-intended, not mean for the sake of it, but there's always someone who crosses the line. So Allie Rose Co is a book creator who's been popular on social media for a little while now, a couple years now, and she also runs a merch site on the side. Some of that merch is related to book content. So for example, I know that I think the listing has been taken down, but I've seen the images of her listing for a bookmark based on the ACOTAR series. And then also there is a Hot Girls Read line of this merch where she is taking the phrase Hot Girls Read and putting it on bookmarks, sweatshirts, t-shirts, etc. And that is what brings us to the drama of the day, which is that at the beginning of the month, this account came to her social media to announce that she had officially trademarked the phrase Hot Girls Read in various merch categories, which I will read to you when we get to that point. Obviously, this did not go over well in the book spaces. There were a lot of issues that people took with this. Firstly, and maybe most importantly, just that it was a very common phrase. It's used by a lot of accounts and by a lot of small businesses use this phrase in their materials and in their merchandise. So it's not something that is exclusive to Allie Rose Co. It's not like she invented it or like nobody else was using it. Like this was a staple of her account. This was a very common phrase. The phrase really reached popularity after Megan Thee Stallion's Hot Girl Summer. So you had like the Hot Girl Walk, Hot Girls Blank became a very popular turn of phrase in a lot of online spaces, and it was not really exclusive to one person or specific to any kind of group. And it was also pointed out by a couple of different people that in the actual trademark documentation, the account does claim to have started using the phrase Hot Girls Read in their merch starting in 2021, but the earliest merch that she actually sold with this phrase was 2023. So there is a little bit of a discrepancy there, not trying to catch any kind of legal drama with that, but it does appear that there is some kind of discrepancy, I think is the safest word I can use there. So that is the drama. That is the immediate reaction that people had to it. I'm going to go ahead and read out the announcements to you because I think they're really interesting for a couple of reasons that I will get into, and they're really good for talking about what I want to talk about. So let's start with the first one. This is like her Instagram caption in an Instagram story. I'm going to read it to you now. Hot Girls Read TM is officially ours. 3-ish years ago, after I started reading more consistently and finally started to love to read, I put HGR on some bookmarks and crews, and the rest is freaking history! ! In the least corny way possible, that little phrase changed my life and changed the entire course of my business in a way I never saw coming. I love that because of these 3 words, a lot of you found me, and I love talking about books with you, smiley face. This trademark is for the freaking girls. The biggest mock neck drop ever is coming next Tuesday at 7 p.m. EST. I'd love to celebrate with you because this is all thanks to you. I want to actually talk about this announcement first a little bit because I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff happening with the language in it. Because if you'll notice, it's all very inclusive. It's all very community minded. Hot Girls Read trademark is officially ours. This trademark is for the freaking girls. This is all thanks to you. I want to celebrate with you. There's this really strong emphasis on community and togetherness, and this being a shared experience, a shared victory, which it obviously is not. I think especially this line, this trademark is for the freaking girls, really capitalizing on this idea of community between young women, bringing girls together and young women together. But book spaces are so inherently community minded because there is this emphasis on sharing recommendations with people, like building trust with another person who you know has similar taste in you, so that you know that you can take their book recommendation, sharing your opinion on a book with people, finding people who have the same opinion and like the same books as you. So already I think we see a little bit of what I want to talk about in this video, which is this tension that grows between community and capital, where the idea, like so much of how you become popular on book spaces and how much you are able to like grow a following in book spaces is related to your interaction with community. But there is also a capitalistic element that rubs against that and that creates this friction. And I think that is where a lot of the backlash comes from, is that this concept of community is in a way being exploited. Not that this is her intention. I really actually don't think that this is her intention. I think that it's just kind of a product of the circumstance, being like a booktok creator, bookstagram creator, where like the emphasis is on community, but you do have this capitalistic duty to your own business. I think this is just kind of the aftermath of that. But so what I mean is that I think people are reacting negatively in part because they see this as exploiting the concept of community, this community and togetherness that grows out of booktok for personal gain. But here is the second announcement. I think this is maybe the more official announcement because it actually lists stuff out, but I will read this to you as well. This is celebratory, of course, but I also want to very gently, with peace and love, many exclamation points, say that I officially have the trademark for Hot Girls Read in the following categories: bookmarks, stickers, notebook covers / book covers, notepads, sweatshirts, t-shirts, hooded sweatshirts, basically everything. I really struggle to think of anything else that you could sell doesn't fall under this trademark. I've seen HGR on lots of items from other businesses that fall businesses with a I'm not going to comment on the grammar. I've seen HGR on a lot of items from other businesses that follow me, so if that is you, please remove the listings from your site as soon as possible. With love. And so I think again we see in this Instagram story there is this real emphasis on peace and love and gentle language. We have this like really soft baby pink in the background. I know it sounds like I'm really like micro analyzing this, but I think it's so interesting because I think that this also is so suggestive of femininity and softness and like everything about it, from the baby pink background to this like peace and love, very gently. There's so much like softness around this language. She's not trying to impose on anybody. This isn't an act of aggression. The language suggests like a gentle correction, and kind of almost like a kindergarten teacher interacting with children, which again is so fundamentally misaligned with what the actual action of this Instagram post is, because what it is a legal threat. Like that's what this is. If you say, I have this trademark, so if you are using this phrase which I have trademarked, please remove your listing, the implication is, or else there can be legal repercussions, like, or else I'll sue you. Like that's what this post is saying. So there is all this like non-aggressive language, very pacifist language, but it is an aggressive act. Like this, I think that I don't want to beat around this bush because I think this is an act of aggression. Like whether it be soft spoken or not, this is a legal threat, and this is like specifically and intentionally coming off after small businesses that also use this phrase. This is also another instance of what I want to talk about, where we have this real tension, this real friction between community and capitalism, because what's happened with this trademark is that Hot Girls Read, the phrase, it was an indication of community, again drawing on these ideas of like friendship between women, especially between young women. It was specifically something that like people thought they shared. It was a shared phrase that you were able to use to like differentiate and define the community around you, the community of hot girls who read. And it sounds silly, and it is silly, but like it is indicative of community. That is what this phrase was associated with. This like catch-all term of hot girls, like being a community of people with a similar interest. And now what this post has done and what this trademark has done is define it capitalistically, define it as something that is corporate, make it proprietal, make it something that can be bought and sold. And that really takes away from the feeling of togetherness and like shared experience. It really takes away from the authenticity of it and the community of it. And then you kind of make the community itself, the community of the hot girls who read, into something that you own singularly, into something that one person owns, which is so completely at odds with what a community is. It's again this very like girly, community-minded language that I think is just not going over well with people because it's so incongruous with what is actually being said. And I find that also just in itself really interesting, this kind of almost like weaponization of femininity in a lot of these posts. And I'm not saying that this is on purpose. I actually really don't think that it's on purpose. I think this maybe just like is the way that she talks. And I also don't know the girl. Like I don't know anything about her. So I'm not trying to make any kind of claims about her as a person, but I think that it is interesting to see the limits of that kind of language, because even following the hot girl phenomenon where we have like girl dinner, girl math, stuff like this kind of infantilization of normal actions whenever girls do them, I think is something that we're also seeing here, and we see the limits of that at the point where people are no longer charmed by the girliness or the like sweetness of something and instead see it as it is. And I want to take a second to say, like, I totally do believe, because I think in a following post she says that she has seen other businesses take her exact design, font, patterns, colors, whatever, whatnot, and make like the exact same, like completely rip her off. And I totally believe that. I 100% believe that, and I 100% believe that if that is the case, maybe somebody in her life advised her you should trademark it so that you have some kind of legal power if somebody tries to do that again. I totally believe that someone somewhere has like completely copied her design and completely ripped her off in that way. Like I said, this happens all the time. Small businesses get their stuff stolen by larger businesses, or honestly by smaller businesses as well. You'll see a lot of like Etsy listings that copy each other, and yeah, that's really disheartening and it's really harmful to the small creators who are getting ripped off in the first place. And I totally believe that seeing those things, she would want to give herself some kind of protection, some kind of legal leverage in order to prevent this from happening again, in order to get those listings specifically taken down. I completely believe that. So regardless of the intention, I think this has really rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, and a lot of people are interpreting it as greedy, and honestly, like, that is kind of how it comes across, because she hasn't said this person has, or this small business has completely ripped me off, this person has a listing that is exactly mine, and they're just selling a cheaper version of like my design, my font, whatever and whatnot. So instead of defending a small business, it comes across as monopolizing. People have also criticized Allie Rose Co and questioned her standing in the book community because she said that she's only been a reader for about 3 years. Personally, I don't really think that's a productive thing to criticize. A lot of people rediscover reading as an adult or become readers as they reach adulthood, as they get older. I think that's normal, and I honestly think it should be encouraged. What is more striking to me and more conducive to the conversation that I want to have with this is that it seems to me that very immediately after starting this hobby, she was looking for a way to monetize it and brought it into her business. I think she had already been selling other merch and stuff before the Hot Girls Read collection, but once starting to read, pretty immediately introduced that also into her business. And I don't think that there is anything inherently wrong with monetizing her hobby, but I do think that when the hobby becomes a part of your business and your hobby is now directly tied to your ability to make money, it doesn't necessarily infringe on your ability to enjoy that hobby and like engage in that hobby in a way that is truthful and earnest. It does complicate your relationship to that hobby though, because now you have such an incentive to engage in that hobby that maybe not all aspects of it, but certainly parts of it may not be as authentic as if you were engaging with it without any kind of incentive, with only the incentive of enjoying it. And I think that equally importantly, it can also come across as disingenuous if you have an incentive to enjoy that hobby. So people who are in your audience seeing you engage in this hobby, knowing that you have this monetary incentive, I think can make it come across as more commercial. Because in a way it is, because you are also running a commercial operation. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are not engaging in the hobby with the same earnestness as somebody who has no financial incentive to do so. It just does mean that there is an incentive to do so. And this isn't just true of Allie Rose Co. Obviously, many creators are monetized, and many creators, like, it's their full-time job, it's their only job, is to be a content creator. So I mean, this isn't something that is specific to her. So after facing some backlash, Allie Rose Co posted this story. I've seen a lot of people's anger about me trademarking Hot Girls Read, so I want to chat about it and clear up some things the best I can. I filed this trademark to protect my products from others copying it, which is common to do when selling products. I was advised to trademark it when it initially started to gain traction from the bookmarks and sweatshirts and sweatshops, in 2023. Again, I completely believe this. I think that it makes a lot of sense if your design is being copied, like, exactly, because I think that people know what I mean. Not just using the phrase Hot Girls Read, but using the exact design, the exact color palette, the exact font, the exact organization of the lettering and everything, like the spacing and everything. I completely believe that she has actually seen people rip her off. At that time, I didn't see anyone with apparel or bookmarks that said Hot Girls Read, although I'm not at all denying that they existed. I would say almost certainly they existed. Since the trademark went through, I haven't come after any small businesses / bookstores that sell products saying HDR, asking them to take down anything directly. I did post a story outlining the categories that I have it trademarked in, giving a heads up that those items are included, and I asked if you have HDR items in those categories to take them down from your site. So I think there were some screenshots floating around of small businesses who had DMs that said, like, Allie Rose Co has this trademark, please take this down. She's claiming here that these messages did not come from her directly, so maybe people in her audience were sending these messages on her behalf. I guess I believe that as well. Sure. However, I also don't know that the difference between DMing these businesses and making this Instagram post is as large as she seems to try to claim in this, or seems to try to imply with this, because with the original Instagram post that said, you know, you should take this down, again, that is a legal threat. That is asserting a legal claim to the phrase, and it does imply that there can be legal action if you do not comply with her trademark. So I don't know that it necessarily matters that she didn't directly go after these small businesses, because she did in a way by making this original post. There have been businesses that copied my work in its entirety and the message was for them, although I can see why it seemed like it came from a place of aggression or malice towards other small businesses that I was not referring to.
I didn't say this well when I was filming, but functionally there is no difference between the small businesses reading this takedown request versus somebody who has directly copied her stuff. Like, you don't get to pick and choose who is affected by the trademark or not. It's a blanket thing. I would like to believe that she did make this trademark in order to protect against people who were stealing her design entirely, but the design is not what is trademarked. The phrase is what is trademarked. So it doesn't really matter in effect if somebody is just using the phrase in their own variation of design, or if they are ripping off her design specifically, because both of them would be equally affected. And so it just, like, doesn't really matter who she intended for this trademark to affect, because it affects everybody.
The goal was not meant to come after small businesses. I don't intend to do that whatsoever. This trademark was simply to protect myself. You can let me know if I'm completely wrong and stupid, but I think it is possible to just copyright her design, and then anybody who copies her design specifically would be in violation of the trademark without without just copywriting the entire phrase. I keep using copywriting and trademark interchangeably. I mean trademark. And also I think a little bit of cost benefit analysis, is the amount of revenue lost to competitors who are blatantly ripping you off actually worth more or equal to what you have to pay for the trademark, the time it would take to enforce the trademark, time it would take to send litigation to the people who are ripping you off. It would be a really intensive work, and especially trademarking the entire phrase. So many people use this phrase. So many people use this phrase in merch, in the merch items that she has trademark over. It would be so difficult to really go through and really enforce this trademark. Is that worth the amount of effort? Is that worth the amount of money that you would be losing to competitors in this time? I don't think that it would be. And again, as I said, she has since surrendered the trademark, which I think was a good idea. There were several creators on TikTok arguing that the trademark's grounds were shaky, partly because of what I talked about earlier with this discrepancy between what was listed on the trademark documentation as the first usage of the term by her and the actual first usage that she claims, which is 3 years ago, not 2021. But also the idea of this being a common phrase, being common use. And I know that at least one creator that I have seen did claim that they were going to make or had made a challenge to this trademark. So it is possible that factored into the decision to surrender the trademark, but I don't actually think there would have been enough time between the challenge and her surrendering the trademark for that paperwork to go through. So it is my opinion, I don't know if this is true, that she surrendered the trademark by her own will. Maybe she saw that the trademark grounds were faulty and that if challenged it would not succeed, but it does seem to me that this didn't come directly as the result of a legal challenge. It seems like it was her personal choice. So that's what I have to say about Allie Rose Co. And I want to now open up the conversation a little bit more to talk about BookTok and its relationship to capitalism and to community more generally. So just kind of using this as a bridge point to talk about this larger conversation, because BookTok has been criticized in the past for its relationship to capitalism, although not always in those words. I feel like a lot of people are not quick to say that they're talking about capitalism in these cases, where I do think that it often does come back to capitalism, in my opinion. So a couple of those instances that I can think of where the root of the issue to me seems to be BookTok's engagement in capitalism, BookTok's economic incentives, but maybe people don't always refer to it as such. So a couple of those instances, the idea of BookTok engaging in fast fashion for books, the way that books are marketed by tropes on social media, I think is an aspect of this, all the marketing surrounding a BookTok book. Special editions and painted edges that seem to be for every new release. I know there has been some drama with book boxes recently, and I don't really follow that, but I'm sure they also can be worked into this conversation, the idea of value, being ripped off, that sort of thing. And I think there are a couple of things that are maybe less explicitly linked to capitalism but can be more abstractly. So the idea of people saying that they get the same few book recommendations every time being something that is the result of algorithms and playing into what's popular, marketing what's popular so that you can get views, that kind of thing. Conversations about consumption habits on BookTok, even conversations about performativity, this idea that there is a right way to look like a reader, whether that is based on having the right Kindle accessories or enormous home library or a designated reading chair, anything like that. I think this is really interesting, especially because to me, reading seems like such a low barrier to entry hobby, especially in countries like the USA and similar places where there is lots of free public library access, and there's also extensive internet access with where you can find public domain books such as the classics. That's how I read a lot of the classics. I was today reading Prometheus Bound PDF is what I put into Google, and I always find something. Secondhand bookstores, stuff like that are abundant in the area that I live, so it feels like there's a pretty low barrier to entry. Some of those free little libraries around the city But you also, like, with that existing, there is also this community of like massive multi-$100 book hauls, and which is like 4 books, and like buying books being very expensive. One book is like $35 when it first comes out, so I mean, it can be a really expensive hobby. But reading, I think, also gets this reputation as an intellectual and enriching hobby, like enrichment for the brain. But there is this financial component because books themselves, like regardless of their mental stimulation and the knowledge they contain, the physical item that you hold is a commodity. It is something that you buy, something that has to be marketed and sold for real money. It is a commodity. Then you add things like sweatshirts and annotation packs and hats and book boxes and such. And I think that a lot of the online community takes on this appearance of being very commodified. And that isn't necessarily a bad thing either. People can spend their money as they like, but it is just kind of this impression that I think a lot of people get, and seems to really be an impression outside of the book community. So like there's so many articles and videos about BookTok promoting overconsumption and being performative and enjoying the idea of being a reader more than the actual habit an action of reading. And some of those I think have valid points. I think there certainly is a degree to which BookTok creates a persona of being a reader, which is qualified by a lot higher barrier to entry traits like having the right setup, always buying new releases, always buying special editions, having multiples of your favorite book, etc., etc. And I think that this also bleeds into book marketing and the publishing industry in general. We see a lot of instances where like having a platform is a barrier to entry to like being an author, getting picked up, and even the marketing itself being around tropes, being like really made for TikTok, these like very short form marketing videos that don't really tell you anything about the book or the plot or anything, just like are designed for clickability. Something that I have criticized in the past is like books that include tropes in such a way that feels less like an earnest inclusion of that trope and more like ticking a box so that that trope can be used in the book's marketing, so that when you go on TikTok and promote the book, you can say it includes XYZ tropes. Making it very clickable, very short form, very like easy for a brain rot scroll to engage with. And that I think all does come back down to BookTok's relationship to capitalism. And I think that that is also kind of a barrier to BookTok's relationship to community, because like it makes all of the interactions that you have with this form of marketing feel that much more sterile and inauthentic. It gives us this commodification, it gives it this corporate talk feeling. So a lot of these tropes that like previously were used by the community to express very quickly some point that might be of interest to another reader that you're recommending the book to now become marketing terms, and then they really lose a lot of that desirability. I think it loses a lot of its authenticity. It loses the allure. And so now these tropes are not being included because the author loves this trope and because the reader wants to see the trope, but because it is marketable. It becomes a part of the book's relationship not to community, but to its existence as a commodity within an economic system. And of course, this is not the case for most book creators. Like I follow a lot of really great creators who absolutely do not fit into what I'm talking about. Really, this seems to be just kind of a perception of the book spaces in general, and an issue that maybe some of the larger accounts deal with, and like maybe accounts deal with in different ways, but it's like it's absolutely not true for everybody. So you have this really interesting relationship between capitalism and BookTok as a whole, and then you also have people who are selling merch. And I mean, I have no issue with this. I think that most people who sell merch are engaging like in an earnest desire to share art and design and their hobby with community. I think that for most people, it is a way of engaging with community and showing solidarity with people. Like by wearing book merch out, you're able to connect with people that maybe you haven't met. Maybe you see someone at a coffee shop or at school or at your job who has the same bookmark or sweatshirt or whatever. And that is like an easy entry point into community, into conversation. I think that for most people, that's what they're doing. And at the same time, I think there is also a kind of combination of circumstances that leads to the Allie Rose Co situation. And it seems a little bit inevitable that at some point, the community is exploited in favor of capitalism. And I should also say that this is also fitting into a gig economy where monetizing your hobby is part of the economy and is extremely lucrative. So in this capitalistic system, people need to make money to survive. And if you can do that by doing something that you enjoy, obviously that's a huge advantage. And I think that we all hope to have a job or a side hustle that we can really enjoy and that we really want to do, because that makes it easier to want to do it and to actually do it when the time comes. And I mean, I'm saying this from a glass house because this channel is monetized and it doesn't make any money, but those are two different issues. If you have a monetary incentive to engage in a hobby, I don't think that necessarily infringes in your ability to enjoy that hobby. It does mean that you may have an ulterior motive when you are engaging with that hobby. So maybe you read a book that you wouldn't have otherwise because it's popular. I think that a lot of people do that. I certainly have done that. And that is kind of, in a way, exactly what I'm talking about, where it is both an engagement with community and an engagement with capitalism. You want to be a part of the conversation by reading something that everybody is reading and that is popular, something that a lot of people will be able to engage with you about, but it also is lucrative. It also puts you in a position where you are more likely to be able to profit. It's absolutely possible to continue that hobby with no change to your habits, even as you begin to make money from it. And it's absolutely possible to entirely change your habits as a result of the money that comes from it. I think that we've seen that with also like a lot of non-book related YouTubers and celebrities who people claim change drastically after the money starts coming in. I guess what I mean to get at with this video is that there is something really interesting about the book spaces online because it is so community based, but by engaging with that community and the people who become more popular in that community, there is also a financial benefit. The more you're able to engage with the community, the more following you have, the more powerful your opinion and your recommendation becomes within the community, the more financial incentive and profit you're able to gain from this community. So eventually it does become a little bit, even if you're not doing exactly what Allie Rose Co is doing, there is the capacity to exploit the idea of community for financial gain. And I think that's exactly what we saw here, especially with this first post really emphasizing this community and solidarity and girlhood that you experience on booktok for personal profit. You have this kind of ladder where the community is related to the content and the content is related to finance. So your ability to engage with the community, your ability to rise to prominence in the community and be really connected within the community becomes directly related to your ability to make money. Two things that are really important to book content are community and consumerism. And I say consumerism not with like any kind of negative connotation or energy around it, just like the actual act of buying a book, buying a product, whether it be fan art, a Kindle case, something like that. There is such a relationship between booktok and consumerism and community, and it seems kind of inevitable that at some point one of those is going to cannibalize the other, because there is this tension where the creator is incentivized to make money, incentivized to encourage consumerism of their own products or their own content, but there is also this idea of community, this idea that everybody is together and engaging in the content together, when really there is one person behind the camera or behind the Etsy shop who is making the profit. There is a tension there, and certainly some people handle it much better than others, and I think that actually majority of people really do earnestly engage with booktok and its community and even its consumerism. I think that there really is an earnestness and a genuine desire for connection and, interaction with other people. And I also think that it's kind of inevitable that somebody like Allie Rose Co would end up doing something wrong with this relationship between community and consumerism, where the desire for capital supersedes the desire for community. I appreciate that she walked back the trademark. I think that's really the only thing she could have done in this situation. I know people had issues with her apology, but to me it seemed like she really was surprised by the reaction that she got, and she could have waited for it to blow over, see if everything would just go away, but she didn't, and I think that actually is, a testament to her ability to course correct. It was a huge waste of money and an enormous blow to her reputation. So I really don't mean any ill will toward her. I feel like she's probably gotten enough harsh comments and like a lot of necessary criticism as well. But I mean, I did see a lot of people who were taking shots at her appearance and stuff that I think is below the belt. It's just something that I find so fascinating, that we have this space where it is so community minded, where the idea is to share opinion and get recommendation from people and engage in a shared hobby that also has a lot of self-serving purpose behind it. There is a lot of monetary incentive, and I think that just any time you get money involved in your hobby, it doesn't necessarily negate the hobby or infringe on your ability to engage with that hobby, infringe on your enjoyment of that hobby. It just creates a very complicated relationship with that hobby where suddenly it isn't just a hobby. It is something more. There is more to it. And of course, you know, it's the world we live in. We live in a capitalistic system. We live in a system where you have to have money to live. So I think it is completely understandable when these kinds of errors are made, not because I think they're excusable, but because this just kind of, again, seems to be the inevitability of when money is involved in a community experience. It makes me think about the compatibility between consumerism and community, and how these two things, I think, like really have a lot of incompatibilities. And it is interesting to see that unfold in real time, but I've been talking a lot, and I think that that is all I have to say to you guys. I would really love to hear if you guys have any opinions on the matter in the comments, if you have anything that you want to add to this or anything that you disagree with me on. And in my own engagement with community and consumerism, please like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.